Great, thank you. This morning, my goal is to kind of recap the overview of the fresh market industry in Washington. Also, and expanding it into the Pacific Northwest, I want to also talk about current research that's occurring for fresh market strawberries in the region, and then briefly go over cultivar choices and what's working for growers. So like the panel discussed, we can't go far on this topic without realizing that our history of the strawberry industry in Washington is being written as we speak. So that's really the point at which we stand. And you know, the decisions that we make as researchers and as grower groups going forward are really going to impact what happens in the future for future strawberry consumers, as well, you know, as of course for the growers. So 2018 was marked the end of the Washington Strawberry Commission, and in many ways this made sense because the commission was largely made up of growers for the processing market, and as processors have moved away from accepting Washington berries, fewer and fewer acres were being planted, fewer and fewer or lower and lower volumes of strawberries were being produced. So the assessments were going down, and it didn't make sense to a lot of the processing growers on the commission to keep it going because they didn't see that this was, you know, a thriving industry that was going to continue to grow. So, but at the same time, the commission was a grower group that set research priorities for strawberry research in the region. And so they were a unified voice for marketing and research that could direct how those funds could be spent to support the industry. Without the commission, researchers have to guess about what issues they should address for the industry, and there's no single marketing, you know, effort that can help the industry move forward. So in many ways, this is made sense, but in another way, it's really hurtful because there's not an industry voice that can help, that directs what's going on for research. Okay, so I want to go over just a little bit about what was driving the processing versus fresh and what led to the decline of the commission. This is one view of what's happening in the industry, and it's from the point of view of plant sales. So this is an overview of the plants that have been sold into Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia. Pat Moore collects this data from the generous collects this from the generous contribution of the nurseries, telling us what plants have been sold into the region. So what I did was I banded together all the cultivars that are usually used for processed and the cultivars that are usually used for fresh. And you can see that from 2006 on, the red band, which is the processing cultivars, those have been in steady decline, meaning those have been planted less and less and less for the last 12 years. Whereas those cultivars that have been used for fresh have been fairly stable. So each year there's been kind of a renewal, the same cultivars, more or less the same amount of acres have been planted to these cultivars. So while the processing market is declining, there's still an important sector of fresh in the region that has, I think, the potential to grow. The other side of the story for Washington strawberries is that nationwide strawberries are a really important crop. And as one of the panelists described, strawberries are just a premier product, and consumption continues to grow. So since 2000, consumption per person per year has risen from about 4.5 pounds and almost doubled to over 8 pounds per person per year. So there's high demand for strawberries, and the local markets, there's a big drive for buying local, getting that really high quality, fresh flavor and high quality product is really still is something that can help promote fresh market strawberries in the region. I want to shift a little bit and also talk about the support that the industry has in place in terms of current research. And this, like Tom Peerbolt said in the panel, is really crucial underpinning for the industry. Tom mentioned that, you know, I'm a plant breeder, so of course plant breeding is close to my heart. But the commission disbanding did have real effects on our research initiatives. This year we were not able to make strawberry crosses for the short day program because of the funding that we lost from the commission. So that had a direct, immediate impact on our plant breeding program. So that is going to continue to snowball if we continue to have to rely on the current sources of how we do research. But there is really strong collaboration across the region, and I want to highlight what the research that's currently going on in Washington and then move to Oregon. So we enjoy across the region strong collaboration. We have started through a new program with the WSDA Small Specialty Crop Block Grant Program. We have a number of fresh strawberry targeted research projects that we've started over the last year and will continue over the next 2 years. One of those is WSU, one of our projects is working and looking at nursery plug production for fresh strawberry growers. Most growers are using bare root plants, and there's a lot of research showing that plug plants perform better in a fresh market scenario. But we don't currently have a nursery industry that's supporting that fresh market. So we're looking at different propagation methods for developing strawberry plugs and looking at the yield and fruit quality performance based on how they were propagated, and then hopefully looking to inform a nascent nursery industry that could support the program. That's going on this spring. Also at WSU, we have Tim Miller, who's our weed scientist, who looks at important weeds for strawberries and then also is evaluating herbicides. And then Lisa DeVetter is heading up also an evaluation of biodegradable mulches that can have application in fresh market strawberries. So that's going on in Mount Vernon. And then here at WSU Puyallup, which is my next bullet point, is our cultivar development and testing. We are looking at short day, which is the June bear, as well as the day neutral breeding and cultivar development for both processing and fresh market. So we have really strong breeding collaborations with the researchers in BC and Oregon, and we share material and evaluate each other's selections across regional climate differences, and that really helps give all that feedback so we can get a really good evaluation for new plant breeding material. And then the Northwest Berry Foundation, as part of the Specialty Crop Block Grant, is putting on 2 workshops supporting grower outreach, helping fresh market growers, new or experienced, to get the resources and have access to resources and networks that can promote their sustainability and economic viability. And then finally, also in Vancouver, we have an extension specialist who has shown interest in looking at fresh market production in protected structures like high or low tunnels, and also looking at organic trials. Okay, moving south into Oregon. The Oregon State University Food Innovations Center has been working on looking at consumer taste panels for different cultivars and fresh strawberries, looking at what consumers look for, what's appealing to them, what they favor in terms of flavor, color, appearance, and then that input can then inform plant breeding processes as well as cultivar choice for fresh market growers. The Northwest Berry Foundation has also secured funding and has been really active in doing grower trials, larger scale for both June bearing and day neutral cultivars, and selections coming out of the breeding programs. And that's often a huge gap between what's being developed in a breeding program and then what actually becomes commercially viable, is just that gap of extensive and really well-run evaluation. So that's a key part of moving that plant breeding effort into what's going to work commercially for growers. So we're really appreciative of their hard work. Oregon State University there at Aurora is looking at a lot of horticultural practices and looking at methods of growing that make sense in terms of irrigation, fertilization, plant bed spacing for the Willamette Valley, and the west side of Washington also applies. And then concentrated at the USDA and OSU and Corvallis, we also have cultivar development and testing. Chad Finn leads that program in breeding, but we are also able to collaborate really closely with him, which is a really amazing partnership. He's working on both short day and day neutrals, although he's maybe thinking about tapering down on the day neutral area. There's also fertility management research. I know that Bernadine Strick, Lisa DeVetter, and Javier Salvador is working on a current nutrient guide for strawberries in the area. And that's going to be a really important resource coming out soon, I hope. And then also at the USDA, the virologist working on strawberries, there's virus testing and cleanup, which is crucial for making really clean stock, certified stock available for strawberry growers. It's kind of the underpinning of what they need for good strawberry production. As I'm going to shift a little bit to what we looked at for a Pacific Northwest Strawberry Growers Survey. As the commission disbanded, we had an opportunity through this WSDA crop block grant to conduct a survey of fresh market or of strawberry growers in the area and to learn what we could about their demographics and what research needs that they see. This is a little bit about demographics. This is looking at Pacific Northwest, and this is across Oregon, Washington, and BC, strawberry farm size. So if you look at the right side of the graph, you can see that about 12% of all strawberry farms that we were able to survey are 50 acres or more. So that's probably looking at our growers that are producing for processing. And so they're the larger operations, but they're fewer in number. And on the left side of the graph, 88% of the growers that we were surveyed are growing on less than 50 acres, which is potentially showing that the fresh growers are more numerous, but are growing on smaller acreages, which makes sense. And looking at growers' number of years in strawberry production is highly skewed towards over 20 years. So that's 57% of the growers we surveyed had been in the business for 20 years or more. And that's a lot of experience that's highly skewed on those growers who are potentially looking to retire soon. And the generations or the newer growers coming up behind them who can potentially benefit from all that experience is lagging. So at this point, unless there are growers who are stepping into strawberry production, who are moving from a diversified vegetable production and potentially adding strawberries to their area, that experience has opportunity to be lost unless there's more and more growers who are bulking up that newer grower demographic. In terms of strawberry farm location, 50% of our survey respondents were out of Oregon, 31% out of Washington, and 20% out of British Columbia, which makes sense. Oregon has the largest industry of the three areas that we surveyed. The main target for the strawberries in terms of fresh processing was 67% of the total number of respondents were growing for fresh, and a smaller number, although probably higher volumes, were going towards processing. So 67% of respondents were going for fresh, 24% for processing. And then this question was trying to get at, has there been a shift from growing for processing to growing for fresh? So have you changed the main target market for strawberries over the last 5 production years? 67% said that they had not shifted. So they were basically growing for the same market they had before. 15% had shifted either from processing to fresh or fresh to fresh processing, although it's probably the former. And then 18% did not apply, meaning that they had not grown for 5 years or more, the newer growers. So again, this transition potentially from fresh to processing, or from processing to fresh, is not happening on a huge scale, but potentially has the opportunity to shift more in that direction. The overall survey conclusions were that fruit quality was the most important trait cluster that growers were looking for in any kind of research that was occurring, either plant breeding or horticultural practices, and then also followed by general disease resistance. And within fruit quality, growers were really keyed into skin color, size, and flavor as important to their markets. In terms of plant characteristics, they were looking for consistent plant quality and durability, meaning that they wanted a robust plant that was durable and produced well over the time that they needed it. And in contrast to the general disease resistance, there was no one disease, insect, or plant stressor that stood out from that body as being the most important, impacting their growing production. And again, underlying that fruit quality is the key. And that's the case for processed or fresh, although what that looks like for each is slightly different. Before I move into cultivars, and I just wanted to give an overview of the different cultivars that are available. I want to highlight that that the research that we have been able to pull together for fresh from this Washington State, or sorry, WSDA Specialty Crop Block Grant is a targeted 3-year research program hoping to support fresh market research needs. So we're looking at plant breeding, getting advanced selections through and tested and evaluated for both day neutrals and June bearers. We're looking at the grower outreach workshops, the biodegradable mulch research, and then the nursery plug production. And that is a 3-year targeted program, which is great that we were able to secure that, but at the same time, it's not going to be something that we're going to be able to do, for example, for long-term breeding. So that's a key question for any new grower group that's trying to direct research. Is plant breeding is a long-term process that very few funders want to give money for. It's very difficult to get breeding money. So that's something to be thinking about, how to efficiently use the funding that we're able to get for breeding, and not rely on these small chunks of, or short-term chunks of money that only go so far but aren't able to have that continuum of breeding. Okay, so I'm going to put my plant breeder's hat on and just talk about a little bit about cultivars, what's working for fresh market. If anyone has experience with some of these cultivars, please, chime in. If everyone benefits from the group input. Okay, so I'm going to start primarily from the early season, what's working for early season through the late season, and also the day neutrals, which are more of the ever-bearing types. Sweet Sunrise is a cultivar that was developed in Oregon. It's an early cultivar. The breeder, Chad Fenn, thinks that it's more like a hood replacement in terms of having high quality fruit in that early season. The June bearing cultivar, its signature is that it's reliably early and it's a reliable yielder, has high yields, very useful for a commercial fresh operation, good appearance and eating quality. Mary's Peak is a cultivar also that was developed in Oregon, a June-bearing cultivar. This is more of a mid-season cultivar. It's brand new, released a couple years ago. It has really great flavor, uniform appearance in terms of color and size, high yield, really good for commercial fresh. And it doesn't have concerns in terms of pest or diseases other than what you need, what is generally accepted for strawberries. Our next cultivar is Puget Crimson, a cultivar developed in Washington by WSU, a June-bearing cultivar. Its signature is that it's quite late season. So the early cultivars are ending by the time that Puget Crimson starts producing. So if you put some of these cultivars together, you can have quite a long June bearing season. Its signature is that it's large and has great flavor. The yield is high, very useful for commercial fresh. Organic production, I have seen it here. It's a very robust plant, so it can do well on some of the variable nutrient availability in organic systems. It is susceptible to powdery mildew, so that is a concern when you're growing Puget Crimson. And spotted wing Drosophila can become a problem on Puget Crimson because of its season. Because it's late, the spotted wing Drosophila populations build up at the same time, so they're available to infest this plant. So that's SWD needs to be monitored for in Puget Crimson. It also has a tendency, if it's hanging on the bush for too long, to get dark and to have an overripe flavor. So very frequent pickings to make sure you get that bright red color before it goes even slightly overripe is important for Puget Crimson. I'm going to shift to the day neutrals. There's 2 day neutrals I wanted to talk about. The first is Albion, which I'm sure most of you know about. Albion was developed in California. It's a day neutral, meaning that it will have a strong spring crop in the June season, and then it will gap, take kind of a resting gap for 1 to 2 weeks before it starts pushing a lot of fruit at the end of July, August, September, October. Its signature is that it is a very firm, attractive fruit with a very mild, sweet flavor. So it doesn't have the intensity of flavor as the traditional Northwest cultivars, but it has a very appealing, sweet flavor that is that is widely acceptable. Its yield is medium, and I'm not comparing it to June bears at this point, but to other day neutrals. It's the most important cultivar in the Pacific Northwest for commercial fresh production. Its pest concerns are powdery mildew during affected years, and then just the very long season of Albion makes it susceptible to SWD, thrips, and the high fertility needs for Albion. Because it's producing all this fruit for 4 or 5 months, keeping up with its nutrient needs is a full-time job. And I also wanted to highlight Seascape, which is still an important cultivar. BC grows it, 10 to 12% of their industry is still in Seascape. It's a day neutral again. It has very high yields. It's a very true red and has the long season. Its yield is usually greater than Albion, where we've seen it. It's good for commercial fresh, and I have seen it in organic production. And again, the pest concerns for this are powdery mildew, spotted wing Drosophila, thrips, and the high nutrient needs for a day neutral. As a wrap up, I really want to thank the 2 commissions, Washington Strawberry Commission, while they supported us, and the Oregon Strawberry Commission. And this WSDA Specialty Crop Block Program has really given a big boost to this potential at our crossroads for supporting the fresh market industry. The Northwest Berry Foundation has been key in doing these grower trials and then putting on this workshop. NorCal Nursery donates a lot of plants to us so we can do our research, and then Rosebreed 2, a USDA SCRI grant, helped us conduct that survey and analyze results. Questions? Thanks. Yes. Would it be possible to get a copy of this presentation? Yes, you can email me. I don't know if we can put it on the USB. And it's probably going to be posted online, the Small Fruit Conference. Okay. Other questions? All right, thanks.
Wendy, thank you. Will you be around if people do have questions during the day? So do, if you have questions,